Welcome to RHI Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are with Patrick Gagliardi, who brings his experience as a Michigan state legislator and former chair of the Michigan Liquor Control Commission in assessing trends and challenges in the state regulatory system. In the 2023 update on alcohol regulation, he highlights how effective alcohol regulation protects the public, ensures product safety, and provides a fair system for the beverage industry.
Hey, Pat, it's so great to have you here today. I know we had a previous conversation, and I was really inspired by your paper because I think it's so timely, the defunding by deregulation, and we'll get into a lot of other topics that I think you could bring. But why don't you just give a brief synopsis of your background and how you got to the position that you were in?
Thanks, Jim. I have immense respect for your organization and the fact that you advocate for good, healthy, safe socialization around our products in bars and restaurants and the such. I am a former legislator, 16 years in Michigan. I represented a district that touched 3 of the 5 Great Lakes. So I was very intimately involved with the hospitality industry. In the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes are where everybody gravitates for hospitality vacationing, not just in the summer, but in all 4 seasons. So I learned firsthand at that level. I left the legislature. I retired after 16 years. In the late 90s and in the early 2000s, Governor Granholm invited me to come sit on the Liquor Commission. I did 8 years while she was there. I retired again, and then Governor Whitmer, our present governor, invited me back to chair the commission for 4 years, which I did. So I've had quite a look at the industry, both from the growth of the industry and trying to help it grow, as well as trying to be a regulator and protect the public health. In this situation, almost 12 years ago now, I wrote a paper on deregulation by defunding. Are the states getting out of the regulation field? We are talking about a drug in alcohol that can be dangerous, and we all know it's so unique that 2 of our 26 constitutional amendments are about alcohol. When you think of over almost a 250 years of history of this country, 2 of our 26 amendments are about alcohol. So it's pretty important. So I did a study, thought we were falling back. I was asked to revisit it this last year, and I asked a good friend of mine, J.T. Griffin, who spent 10 years as a legislative representative for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to come in and work on it with me. J.T. is a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., former staffer on the Hill, and just immense background and a great writer. So he and I, and with the help of my lovely wife, Deb, put together this paper. She's a retired attorney and good editor. And we hope that it wakes people to the understanding that the first 90 years of regulation since the end of Prohibition till now have been very successful for this industry. It's grown in product, in ABV, in hours sold, in number of licenses all over this country. And the reason that's done, we believe, is safety. And you got to have good regulation, and you got to monitor the licensees and what's going on out there to keep it safe. And I know it's something you believe in, Jim, in your organization, as you try and develop with your night managers and from some of the biggest cities around, try to develop a good nightlife. And what's most important thing about any place we want to visit, we want it to be safe.
That's great. That's great. So you had said something that you kind of monitored changes that happened in the regulation. So in 2013, you were identifying some of those changes. Naturally, 1933 was a different world. And you have policies that were put into the different states because they have 2 different state systems, 2 different state structures. So how do you see the evolution of regulations? I know that in some states there was kind of a breakup of the enforcement and regulation pieces. Sometimes I believe it was South Carolina, where they just put alcohol into a kind of a financial department rather than a regulatory department. So you have a lot of these kind of changes, some of which have been helping to do what you're saying, advancing responsible social spaces, while at the same time working with communities to manage it better. And then in some cases, these regulations haven't kept pace with societal trends. So what did you observe, and how do you feel that's affecting the state of the regulatory world?
Well, first of all, let me say I think our forefathers were very wise in the implementation of alcohol regulation back in the 30s. It was a different world. We served the first legal alcohol. It was a beer to the governor of Michigan in downtown Detroit in March of 1933. We were the first state to vote to end prohibition. And the governor drank a glass of Stroh's beer in front of 30,000 people in downtown Detroit. It was 3-2 beer. And let me say to you, how has the industry changed? There is no ABV that low in any beer out there, unless you get a non-alcoholic beer, which is less than 0.05. So it's changed. The ABV, the amount of alcohol per volume has gone up. The growth in wine, which is a higher ABV, and of course spirits, which is even higher ABV, has exploded over the last 90 years. And I think having a couple things have helped us keep safety in mind. Number one, we have put in the distribution tier, which I think keeps the linear of what do they call it when the manufacturer down to the retailer owns everything. We put the distribution tier in there so the manufacturers can own everything, and I think that's helped us a lot. I think the other thing that's really helped us a lot is the federal government in the last 40 years getting the blood alcohol level down for drinking and driving. We still have problems, but we keep working on it. And I think the public sees what we've tried to do with regulation, keep it out of the hands of kids, keep it out of the hands of people driving, keep licensees out of the business who are bad people. I think they see that as a positive. And in fact, as the Center for Alcohol Policy every 2 years does a nationwide study, and they equally divided up Republican, Democrat, and Independent. And you'll find that 80% of the public does not want the government to mess with our alcohol regulations. They want it regulated. They want it heavily regulated. And I think states are trying, to your point, to tinker with it a little bit to try and help their business community and adjust to the modern day business. For instance, in Michigan, we have social districts now where a local community can essentially cordon off an area. They're responsible for it. And the bars and restaurants in that area can serve, and the service can go between the different establishments. That is a big change. During the pandemic and afterwards, while I was chairing the commission, thousands of outdoor service licenses were given in Michigan. Now you think, hey, Pat, they're way up north. It's cold there. They put up these I don't want to call them tents, but they have plastic sides with heaters inside. People loved it. And there's outdoor service year round at some of our facilities here in Michigan. What else have I missed here? Oh, cocktails to go. Something that would never have been passed in 1933 is passed here and in most states now, where you can have a cocktail mix. Has to be packaged right when you walk out the door, but if you can buy it legally and take it out the door. So a lot has changed. In Michigan, you can buy alcohol at gas stations. A lot has changed. We've done some stuff on the public health side too. You can't drive through and purchase alcohol on a drive-through in Michigan. And so I think there's been a back and forth with the public health folks as to what's safe and not safe. I think on the whole, the local communities and the state has tried to make it safe. They know that has allowed the growth we've seen. But I am concerned as I looked at all the state budgets of the fact, Jim, that if you look at a state budget, they're all online. You can probably find where they're receiving revenue from alcohol, but you cannot find anywhere in those numbers what they're spending to regulate alcohol, to do the licensing and the enforcement. And a little bit of that goes to your point that since 2012, more states are taking their alcohol regulators and having them regulate lottery, cannabis, gaming, of other sorts. It's very unique, and I think that can be a problem. We need to go back and if we're going to legalize a drug that can be potentially dangerous, we need to go back to the beginning where we said we're going to make sure it's safe out there.
Mhm. Well, these are all important, and you know we've heard this. We've been using the term social district to define more areas where you have a concentration of dining and entertainment venues, and not necessarily where you have public access. So we have to rethink our terminology because I don't want to confuse people when we use social districts. They used to be called entertainment districts. In fact, that was some of the early legislation that came out of Alabama and some other states to set up these public drinking areas. But regardless, I think I want to ask you this because these are all changes that are happening. And I was actively involved in a lot of alcohol policy work in the late 80s and early 90s. And I can just imagine that there'll be those who say, wait a second, the more available alcohol is, the more likely you're going to increase people's consumption and therefore increased alcohol-related harm. And that these types of situations, if they're not properly monitored, can result in, I know when we worked in New Orleans on Bourbon Street with the to-go cups, just underage drinking in the public space was problematic because kids could just buy alcohol, walk around the streets, put them in cups, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of enforcement around that. So with your comments about, reduced budgets and reduced enforcement personnel per population, which is some of the things that you talked about, is there a possibility that some of this liberalization of where and how people drink could ultimately lead to more problematic behaviors?
Well, I think it will lead to not only more problematic behaviors, but it's going to lead to the public demanding of their elected officials to do something about it. And we have opened this up slowly over 90 years, I think in pretty good fashion, pretty safely. But if we just open the door wide without some thought to the public health, I go back to the comment I said to you, when you or anybody listening to this goes out to eat, drink, any kind of entertainment, movie, whatever, you want to go someplace safe. And the problem with our drug, the drug of our industry, and I'm a very proud member of that industry, is it can cause problems. We see it every day. So we have to make sure that the way we serve it, how we serve it, where we serve it is safe. Otherwise, the people in business will go out of business because nobody will want to come there. We had an entertainment district in a community in Michigan, and it was just the problem. They didn't monitor to have enough security there. We had a doorman, a security man, throw a patron out of the front door and kill him, and that kind of ended the whole idea. You got to go into this thing with safety. Listen, you go to New Orleans, you go to Las Vegas, any place that's tried this, and we'll have the same problems perhaps in some of our social districts. There's public urination. Nobody wants to see that. There's sexual assault or sexual comment assault. Nobody wants that. You got to make sure that it's a safe, friendly atmosphere to enjoy our product, to enjoy the food and beverages that surround our product. We all want to do that. That's why we get demands for more licenses in every state, certainly in our state. But if we don't bear down on the fact that it's got to be safe, we're going to run into problems. And what'll happen, being an old politician, Jim, what'll happen is the public will demand that their local and state officials do something about it, just like with drinking and driving.
Mhm. Now, again, because we've worked in a lot of different cities, what comes up sometimes is you got the local authorities, and they're trying to manage the growth, like you said, from an economic development point of view. And entrepreneurs are always coming up with the latest new idea of opening up some kind of a social venue, as we call them. Um, and then they'll go to the state, they'll get the alcohol license, and sometimes the localities have limited knowledge or input until after that process has started or begun. And then you get problematic businesses, and the time it takes for locals to take action against a problematic business working with the state is often so long that the business can just operate until they end up having to be cited. So I think that what I'm asking you is if enforcement at the state level is being reduced and more responsibilities are placed on the local community. um, I know there are some states like Illinois where the local licensing authority is based within the city, and then the state really just reviews that. But in some cases, the local authorities doesn't exist, and they have to depend upon the state. So how do you see the future of balancing localities which see the trends happening more quickly than state legislators and state regulators can respond? Do you think there's a need to build better communication between localities and state authorities on a more regular basis that can work through some of these issues, and to look at not just liberalizing some of the laws, but also doing what you're saying, assuring that there's a local capacity to manage in a much more efficient way, safety?
Good question. First of all, let me say in our state, where I've been a liquor commissioner for 12 years, a legislator for 16 years, we could not enforce the alcohol laws without the help of local law enforcement. That's been an important partnership over the years to go with our 65 enforcement officers for a state of 10 million people. We couldn't do that. Secondly, we have written in the law the ability for local units to object to any on-premise license liquor by the glass, the old liquor by the glass. I still love that thing. And we also have written into our law ability for local units of government to petition the state to get rid of a license, because our licenses in Michigan only go year to year. There's nothing in stone that says you can go longer. So I think there's a good, pretty good relationship here in our state. And maybe what we should do, Jim, is go around the country. There's best practices everywhere, and kind of get those out to each state, each local, through the municipal leagues and the state associations, and get best practices out there that legislators can look at if they need to change the law and allow for better communication between the state and the local. I'm real happy with what we have here in Michigan. Is it foolproof? No, but the commission gets very few complaints over the last 20 years that I've been involved that there isn't a good communication between the two. Every once in a while you have that, but it works, and best practices and spreading the news on that will be a good way of us helping each other.
Great. So we're running close to the time here. Just a real quick response, kind of a quotable quote here. We might have this as part of the introduction to your session. But if you were to write your paper again for the third time in 2033, who knows what artificial intelligence will be like back then? Maybe you just have to think about it and it'll create the article for you. But what would you predict the changes will be? That'll be after our 100th, actually be the 100th anniversary. So how do you see the world of alcohol regulation being changed 100 years in 1933? I mean,
Well, let me put it
2033, yeah.
Yeah, let me put it this way real quickly. AI may have done a better job on my writing of the paper, but my partner, JT Griffin, was, he's one of the best writers I've ever worked with. So I think moving forward, yes, it's a brave new world. If I had three takeaways, and the last takeaway would be about the future. Number one, the first 90 years of regulation have worked pretty well. It's allowed an incredible growth in an incredible industry. Secondly, the second takeaway would be, don't take our eye off the ball. What grew this industry was safety. If you think about your own self and your own habits, you're not going to go to a place that's not safe. You're not going to go to an area that's not safe. You need safety to combine with our entertainment areas, our entertainment districts, social districts, whatever you want to call them. But thirdly, I see the future is bright. And people say, well, why do you see that? Less people are drinking alcohol. Non-alcohol is growing. I mean, this Athletic, the people that started that non-alcoholic beer, and the major companies like Corona and Guinness and Coors, Miller Coors, are putting out some tremendous products without alcohol. Why do you see the industry is growing? I see us as having more social time moving forward, as long as we don't have another pandemic. People are working from home. People are working less hours. More people are living off whatever they have. And I think that's going to allow them, or a need for them, to socialize. And we're going to have hospitality areas for them to go. Whether it's a restaurant, a bar, whatever it is, whatever the entertainment is, a movie theater, an athletic facility, whatever it is. People are going to have more time. People are going to have more disposable income. And I think that bodes well for our industry. How it changes, I don't know. Jim, did you think that as we talk here in July of 2024, that the fastest growing part of the beer market is non-alcoholic beer? I mean, that's not only is it's a cataclysmic change. I mean, it's just incredible change. So there will be changes we can't think about, but I see our industry as changing. Yes, how it changes will be up to the business people and the regulators to monitor it. But I see it. The future is bright, and alcohol will be in the middle of it. Non-alcohol, entertainment, hospitality will all be there together. And I think if we work together, I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thanks, Pat. That's a good summary. I think it's again a balance of economic development, safety, and responding to market forces and trends, and making an industry adaptable to that, and having government be there at the table to make sure that the rules and policies are in place to facilitate, what it is that communities want and what the public wants, but also to make sure that everybody's safe. Well, I appreciate your
Well said.
time. I appreciate your time for this, and I look forward to seeing you in Sacramento.
I look forward to being with you, Jim, and to you and your board. I know several of your board members. You got a great board. Just keep up the good work, and we can build a larger and better business, and we just have to keep the pillars of what built this business in mind as we do it.
All right. Well, thanks.